All right. Hello. Uh, I'm Austin. I am somebody who identifies as a composer, uh, someone who writes writes music that originates from the kind of classical tradition, I would say. Um, yeah. So you'll. I'm not going to talk too much about myself here. I mean, I will definitely talk a lot about myself in different ways, but the whole idea of this thing is to yeah, that's it. Yeah, so I'll slow down for a second. So this is my first video, so I'm pretty like nervous and trying to figure it out, so this is going to be super messy, but then it will get better later as I get better at this and more comfortable. So then, yeah, why am I putting myself through this? Why am I even, you know why am I doing a live composition session when I could just do it comfortably in my own privacy? Um, so yeah, the reason is because I kind of feel compelled to help people that I see my younger self in. Um, and what I mean by that is I'm noticing, on a lot of forums and social media, Reddit kind of a thing, a lot of composers kind of early on in their sort of journey, and even composers who have quite a bit of experience, and even people who know a lot of music theory and have gone to school for music. A lot of these people are still struggling to be able to finish a piece and to just write music and have fun composing. And they just are getting stuck. They're expressing that they, you know, get all excited and inspired, and they have a great idea, and it just they have a little bit of music, and then they just hit a wall and can't seem to go forward, lose motivation, and then start another piece, and they just have all these unfinished pieces. uh, and that's exactly how I used to be, and it was extremely painful. Um, you you know it, it sucks to like identify as this thing. You're kind of building this identity, like, I'm going to be a composer, I'm somebody who writes music, or you just desire to make music. You just want to do it, for whatever reason, and then you can't do it, and you get stuck, and it becomes frustrating. Like, that's just a horrible place to be. Um, and so, you know, I can see myself in these people expressing this, pain, and I I know exactly how that feels, and I am now, kind of on the other side of that. So I was there, and it was painful and it sucked, but I really still wanted it, and I wanted to find a way through that, and I eventually did, through, a lot of work on myself, and kind of getting educated on certain things, and just doing a lot of introspection, I guess. And now it's, I'm kind of in a place where I have a lot more confidence, to be able to just finish a piece. Like, I know that I can start something and that I can finish it. And there's kind of a psychological switch that happened along the way that allowed me to get there. And it feels really good. It's super fun. Um, and it's a process of discovery and exploration. And there's a lot of, yeah, I mean, there's a lot more that I get to explore that's outside of the music itself, and using the music as a vessel to explore these other things, and that's really fun for me as well. And everyone has a different reason for wanting to create music. So my solutions that I've come up with for myself are not necessarily what's going to work for other people, but there are principles that I operate by, and that I'll try to articulate as I go along, that are applicable to any type of composition. It doesn't matter if you're a songwriter or a producer who makes beats or someone who composes, in more along the lines of the classical tradition uh, and its specific evolution. It doesn't matter. Like, there are principles that just hold true. And, my specific process might enlighten you to maybe some new ways of approaching it, or ways of seeing, um, ways of thinking about the process of composition or music writing. Um, yeah. So I, to get back to the kind of problem solution thing, being in that kind of position where I have that kind of sense of confidence that I can get through a piece, and music is just a fun, exploratory thing. And that feels really good. And I want other people to feel that sensation. I want people to have that. And you don't even have to think of yourself as a creative person, even though we're all the same in that regard. We are all creative people. You don't have to, I'm going to do my best to like not do anything that's gatekeeping, that implies you need to like have a certain, I don't know, be a certain way, or have something that like you don't have right now. And I don't want to make you feel like you're not worthy, because everyone should make music, I think. It covers so many things, and you can approach it from so many angles, and it really is just like a vessel for other things, in my opinion. And it's beautiful just on its own, in its own right as well. And so it just depends on how you want to approach it, right? So, yeah. I don't know how much music I will actually get through in this session, because it's kind of a introductory session, I guess. But I will start something before I end it. I just don't have a ton of time, but I just wanted to get this just started, because if I didn't just do it and do it live, then I would become too kind of, I would talk myself out of it probably. Okay. Need to take a breath. Probably, let's see, what else should I go over before we get into this? So probably some warnings. I don't know, that feels heavy. So a heads up on some things. Some things to expect with me here. I guess one thing is that I am not super. I'm not the best at speaking. I can be. I can be really good at times. So I go in and out of, having a really good flow, and then being really like, having really broken speech and trying to find words, and going back on things and repeating things, and just awkward silences and stuff like that. So and that's kind of the nature of doing something live also. But I'm just not one of those people who's like super articulate and can just easily get my ideas out verbally. But what better way to practice than by doing this? So I will get better. I like getting better at things that I'm not good at. So sorry, I'm a bit of a brute when it comes to talking, at least for now. Yeah, and I don't know, like, why is that? Like, I've spent my entire life using the English language. Why am I not just a pro at it? Well, I think, as a little, kind of a tangent for a second, I am someone who is very much, I have a very rich inner world, and I've always been very inward looking, if that makes sense. Just someone who spends a lot of time sort of just thinking and watching the contents of my mind and just spending a lot of time in my head. I'm just one of those kind of people. And I think it's pretty common among artists and composers, musicians, and stuff, creative types who identify that way and pursue that type of thing. A lot of us have all kinds of mental issues. But I think in general, it's like there's this energy that needs to be focused towards something, and this inner world that we're trying to make sense of. That's not everybody. We all approach the creative process from a different angle, but I think that's that's true and for a lot of people. Yeah, so I'll try to get better at speaking, and I'm going to do my best to articulate as much as I can during the process. And again, continuing on this subject of just talking, um, I will probably use a lot of technical terms. I'll be using the vernacular of, composition. Within, that tradition, there is a, set of language that works, and there are just technical things, but I know that everyone's on a different, a lot of people are just starting. They don't know a lot of these terms. Some people are well versed in these terms, whatever. But I'll try to kind of explain things that I feel like might not be known by a lot of people in the beginning stages of composition. So I'll do my best to just try to make everything as clear as possible. But I might not do a great job at that. Who knows? Excuse me. I'll try not to keep clearing my throat as well. But let me grab a drink. Okay. I think that is all on the speaking front. Yeah, so what else? So I probably will, just like I did, I will probably go off on tangents. I'll probably veer off in a direction on a subject, and I will try to come back to the main point that I was making, but there is a chance that I will kind of get lost because I'm going off on a subject that I think is important. There is a lot of I'm very interested in kind of the philosophy and the inner workings of the mind while composing, and the kind of just the reason for doing this in the first place, and things like that. So I will constantly just be going off in a direction, and yeah, so just a warning, I guess, just a heads up. If that's annoying, there's probably going to be a lot of annoying aspects to this, especially in this super raw form. Yeah. So, what else? Something else. Let's see. Another reason to stop watching this right now. see if anyone even sticks around after all this. Okay, so yeah, my music, the type of music that I like to write, or that I'm just kind of naturally interested in, is atonal. Don't leave, or do leave. I don't know, whatever. When people hear atonal, it's just they run away. So many people just I don't know, don't want to understand atonal music. I'm not here to sell you on it, but it's not easy listening. It's not just pleasing, easy, beautiful music for people who are not really into that. But I don't want to make it sound like it's just impossible because I think it's absolutely beautiful and it's my favorite thing. Um, but so hopefully, well, maybe I'll go into that just a little bit more, a little bit of a tangent here as well. So, like my general approach right now in this, season of my life, I'm sure it will evolve and change and stuff like that. But like, um, I, so the reason I like to write music that is generally considered atonal is because I feel a greater sense of freedom, and I feel like I can just be more honest with what I'm doing. I can get closer to the sort of imagery that's in my head, uh, and and I also see I see tonality. So I don't know if you're familiar with what tonality is, or tonalism versus atonality or atonalism. So tonality is basically just, it's operating within the sort of diatonic system, which means you know the major scale is kind of the basis of this whole thing, right? So there's the major scale, and then there's its modes. So the major scale has a root note. Let's say you're in C major. C is your home key, right? And then if you want to use different modes of that key, you might start on D or E, or some another note in that scale and make that the home, and then that has a little bit of a different color to it. Uh, and then I'm probably not explaining this very well from the ground up, but um, anyway, so there's also this sort of, when you are a tonal composer, you often will think in sort of, chord progressions and things like this, and naming chords, and it's all just, there's this whole flavor to it. And I don't like to be restricted by that, and I don't really like to think in chord progressions. I'm more inclined to think contrapuntally, and I like to use voice leading, but I'm not trying to write like Bach either. I'm going to use some of that as a tool, and have a basic understanding, or not, a pretty solid understanding of the tendency of two notes together and where they might want to go within the context of what I've written before, of what came before it and stuff. I'm kind of rambling here, but so tonality is often associated with pleasant sounds, and you know uh, I don't know, just there's a world around it that is generally pleasant and makes sense. It has a lot of logic to it, and it's just a flavor. To me, it's like basically a palette. And I like to just see that as a palette, and to dip into that palette when I want to. Um, Atonality, something that was, pretty much established or made popular or infamous by Arnold Schoenberg. Um, it liberates all of the 12 tones, right? So depending on how much you know, it's hard to like explain every detail, but there are 12 tones in the Western system, right? The Western scale has 12 notes on the piano. Those 12 notes just keep repeating in higher and higher octaves. Uh, and so even though I don't necessarily write 12 tone music where I'm trying to use all 12 notes, I like to build a set of my own, build a scale of my own. And to me, this creates a specific color that I want to use. And I'll use a lot of dissonance, and then I'll use a lot of like consonant, beautiful moments that do have proper voice leading, that functions in a pseudo tonality, in a pseudo tonal way. Uh, I like strong juxtapositions of really harsh, brutal dissonances next to something really beautiful and delicate. But it's all going to be contextual. It's not just for no reason. Um, I really see when I compose, I'm not really thinking in, like I said, I'm not really thinking in like chord progressions and that type of thing. I'm thinking more, um, what is it? More like intervallically. Like I'm really interested in intervallic relationships and building a kind of language within each piece that has um, this intervallic um, kind of world that's there's that's kind of the limitation that I put on myself is and when I say intervallic, that means the distance between two notes. So the distance between C and C sharp is a half step, right? There's in the tonal system or in the Western system, there's nothing between that, right? So that's very close, and you play those two notes together, and there's kind of this beating, this unsettled thing, this dissonance, and then maybe you have a fourth or a perfect fifth connected to that, and then that's more of a consonant, a little bit more of a rested interval, and the two together create this sort of sense of it's playing with space, open and closed space. You have this closed tight interval, you have this open interval, and that's a flavor, that's like a sensation on its own. And so I like playing with space like that and creating spatial relationships. And so I might create a scale. I might start with my own scale that just has intervals that I want to play with, or I might just do something really intuitive on the keyboard and just, based on an idea, a general gesture or general kind of texture, and then I might derive a set of a scale or a set of intervallic relation, or well, interval relations. I'll derive that retroactively and see what I did there, and then use that as the language. Build that as the material that I'm now working with, so that I can have some type of consistency of sound throughout the piece. And that's what's interesting to me. So in a lot of ways, I'm a very visual person when it comes to music. Um, to me, it feels I think it's kind of cliche to say like I'm like painting with sound, but that's what it feels like. Like I'm seeing a shape and a color and a gesture, and it has textures, and I'm trying to find that in I'm trying to put that down. I'm trying to get that recorded, and it's a lot easier for me to do that in a way that allows me to use all of the notes, and to kind of dance around uh, the keyboard. I'll use the keyboard as a tool, and I can just build a palette with that and not have to worry too much about trying to like fit within this rule set of say tonality, or trying to make a 12 tone piece where I have to uh, go through each of the 12 tones before I can repeat any things like that. Like these are really tight, sticky systems, and I don't. That's a thing on its own. That's a challenge on its own, and it has its own purpose. But for my expressive purposes, though, that's too restrictive, and I find other ways to I find other constraints to give myself to build a world that is consistent. So anyway, long ramble, but I think that's necessary. So it's very low probability that you're going to like the music that I make. So hopefully the principles, you know, can be, you know, hopefully the principles will be what shines through, or what you can take away. And excuse me. And if you want something bad enough, you're going to read between the lines. You're going to, so, use your resources, you know, observe things that I'm probably not even conscious of, and hopefully something will help you just watching one particular composer do their thing uh, live, um, the way that they do it. And so all I can do is be as honest as possible in that process. Uh, anyway, yeah. So, oh yeah, another little thing is that like I don't write. Like I use fairly free rhythms. Like I don't write consistent rhythmic music. Like this is in 4/4 and I'm using eighth notes here. Like that's pretty rare for me, at least in this season of my what I'm interested in composition. I like just more of a free form, but it's not just totally just nonsensical. Like it will make sense and there will be a sense of consistency. Like I do care about the result. But I like this sense of freedom and sense of openness and creating sort of chaos and making a mess and cleaning it up in a lot of ways. That's kind of a principle that I use a lot. Is this making a mess and then chiseling something out of it, right? So yeah, I feel like I could talk about this forever. There's a lot of things that come to mind when I start talking about this, but I'll probably just touch more on these things as I go along and just demonstrate kind of like what I'm doing. Anyway, so that being said, let's see, is there anything else that I should preface this with? Yeah, I guess on that last point of making a mess and stuff. So that's kind of the idea. I don't think I touched on this already, but so I want to kind of show how messy and sort of unromantic the process really is, the process itself of composing. And like obviously it's my process, this one. It's going to be very similar to a lot of other composers' process as well, but a lot of other composers might have a much cleaner approach to it or a more intellectual approach to it or a, just whatever, some other aesthetic or other way of thinking and moving forward in the piece than I do. So this is one composer's perspective. But it's generally for most composers, like there's a sketching process. There's this like kind of, it's messy. You're trying to find something that works, and for me, like the biggest thing is that like I'm looking for what makes me excited about music is looking for that moment that becomes kind of magical, a little bit like something like an effect that transcends the material itself, right? So it's like we have these notes being played, but for some reason because of the context and because of the just something special about the moment, it has a heightened sense and it takes us outside of the sound itself and it puts us in this kind of we kind of embody it and we kind of become maybe slightly emotional about it, or we get a sense of confidence when we listen to it, or we get a sense of awe or even just surprise or like comedy. Like it's funny, like it kind of surprised us and did something like funny and unexpected. But I am looking for that little magical moment to happen at least once in the piece. And sometimes that is one small turn. It could be one little like harmonic change, or it could be a whole section that just has a magic, and it's hard to explain because it's only something that the music itself can do. so it's like you can only intellectualize it so much, and eventually you just have to surrender to the medium. That's why that's why the music exists, right? As it does, because it does something that no other form of communication can quite do. So that's what makes where it'll be kind of difficult for me to explain literally everything, because I'm not going to be able to. But I can at least explain my choices and my intentions, and what I'm looking for, and then we find happy accidents, and it's a discovery process. So that's what makes it so much fun, right? Um, and yeah, okay. All right. So I think I might have said all that I need to say as far as the introductory period goes. So yeah, where to start? Okay, so we can kind of get into the compositional process as I approach it in general in this time in my life. Something that really works for me. So, okay. So instead of just like, I will almost never just like sit down and start playing something. Oh man, okay. I just thought of another heads up, something to be prepared for, I guess. So I am not a pianist. So just remember that I am not like an actual pianist, but I use the keyboard to, I use, an 88 key MIDI keyboard uh, as my tool for composing, for getting down ideas. And so it's gonna be rough. Like I do have a little bit of training in piano. I took some lessons and had to do some recitals and stuff like that. Uh, but I never. It's not something I sit down and practice. I'm not trying to be a pianist and perform on the piano. Though I mean I know that would definitely help me just get musical material onto the page faster if I did practice that. So maybe I should. But that's not my concern right now. I like the layout of the keyboard because it makes uh, the full range of notes available and in a very clear and clean way. And so I think that's why most composers use the piano, even though they are not pianists. So that's pretty typical. But yeah, it might be annoying if you are a pianist, or just it might be annoying anyway, just seeing me like just slam my caveman mitts down on the keys trying to find something that is enlightening or whatever. Um, and so yeah, so I will. It's a grueling process. I will record really rough things. I'll come up with some ideas, and I'll use Logic Pro. Like I use a DAW, a digital audio workstation. My choice is Logic Pro, but it really doesn't matter what you use. And there's a reason that I use this. It is a very conscious thing, and it's something that I have evolved toward, and it took a while for me actually. So here's another tangent. Sorry, I know I'm just like talking and talking and talking, but we'll get through this and whatever. Just hang out with me. And so yeah, about that. I used to have this like kind of mental hang up, uh, this sort of visual idea and pressure on myself of what being a composer looked like, and what I should be able to do. Um, I Yeah, so it's I kind of had this sort of, I don't know. I've heard people call this like an like elitism. but it's just whatever. It's the image that I had in my head, which is this kind of Mozart, this image of like, I need to be like Mozart, and I need to be able to like take, manuscript paper and just write the music that's in my head, just write the notes straight from my head. And uh, and that, I mean, that's an extreme, but then of course there's like musical notation software like Sibelius and Muse Score, uh, and so I kind of, I started using that stuff, and I thought that like that was a good way, that's probably what I should use since I'm a composer, like I'm a composer, so I write notes on manuscript paper. That was the kind of idea in my head. And people who use a DAW, like I had friends who used Reason and Pro Tools and Logic and stuff, but those were people who made like EDM, like they made beats and they recorded bands. And to me, that was not what a composer used. A composer writes notes on manuscript, right? And so I thought, that if you were a composer and you used Logic Pro for that, then there was this, I don't know, this ego driven thing where it's like you were not doing it right. You weren't legit or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, I so yeah, after realizing that that wasn't the best form, so I think I'm very affected by the visual field. And so seeing this blank white page and thinking that I need to just fill it with notes and come up with these genius ideas was super unhealthy. And it wasn't productive. And just staring at that blank white page, white screen, which is even worse than a piece of white paper, was like, it just had this like mind erasing effect. You just stare into the abyss, into this like light shooting at your face, and then you try to be creative and make something, and then I'm also having this like idea that it needs to be really good and it needs to be genius before I can show anybody. So all these mental issues, and having this visual realm affect me. So okay, but I'm not saying, okay, well, so my reason for using something like Logic Pro is because I finally got to the point where it's like I felt like I can, it just feels like the the place where I can just be expressive, and it's not, the program isn't imposing anything on me, whereas like starting the composition process in a notation software, you're dealing with the format of it. You're dealing with things snapping into place and having to come up with a time signature and things like that. And there's just this like strictness to it, in the sense that you're just in this box. It like feels like a prison, and then that affects what you write, because you kind of just become more inclined to write simple rhythmic things. Like I'm just gonna make eighth notes here because this like thing that's slightly longer than an eighth note, but not quite the next thing, is too difficult to try to make in this. And so then you start confusing the tools with the goal, and you start messing with the tools, and then you spend a whole day just trying to format things and trying to figure out things with the tool, and you never actually got the musical idea out. So there's a time and a place for these things, right? So I'm not saying I don't use notation software, and I love writing notes on actual manuscript paper with a pencil. Like that's one of my favorite things, sitting at a piano and just writing the music. Whoa, sorry. Uh, but it really depends on who I'm writing for, what I'm writing for. If I'm writing for a string quartet or something like that, or other instruments, I like to use manuscript paper, and I like to use a little bit of Logic Pro just to get the ideas recorded really quick, and then I can move MIDI notes around and manually do all this stuff, and it feels very it just feels like the process feels more natural. Uh, and then, if I'm writing for something like the violin, I like a lot of kind of extended techniques, as they call them, which is using things that are kind of difficult to notate in traditional notation. So you kind of sometimes have to invent your own notation, and you have to, do things that are not easily put into notation software unless you're like a pro at using that. So I'll do that on paper, and then I will put that into notation software so that I can make a really beautiful part and something that is as easy to play or easy to understand for the player as possible, so that I'm serving them properly. But for the sake of this session and what I've been kind of interested in lately, just for now, is using the piano, just limiting myself to the stock Grandway or Steinway grand piano sample in Logic Pro, using a keyboard, MIDI keyboard, and just sticking with only that to get the musical idea out. And something that I will constantly be kind of reiterating is the importance of the musical idea. So I like a very minimal approach when it comes to tools, and I've always kind of been like that. So, my main instrument is guitar, and I've never been a gearhead. I've never been the kind of person who collects guitars and pedals and all this gear. Like, I have always just used what I have always used, and not even super nice stuff. I mean, I have a classical guitar that's like my baby. That's really a nice guitar, but that's the only one I have, right? So I like the musical idea the most. So for me, I don't need high production. When that's appropriate, that's great. Like, I'm not against anything, but I just want the music to shine. I want the musical idea. I just keep repeating that, to be the most important thing. And if I can get that, and get it recorded and out as fast as possible, without having to deal with too much gear and production and choosing instruments and excuse me, building sounds and stuff, and using plugins and all these things. Like, I just am not very concerned with tools. I want the music. That's what interests me the most, and that's not an opinion. That's not me stating an opinion on what you should be doing or what's good or bad. People love tools, and if you love them and they make you happy and you like experimenting with plugins and gear and stuff like that, then do it. Just do what makes you happy. This is what makes me happy, is the musical idea. So for this session, I will be using the piano sound, and I will be using the keyboard as if it's supposed to be piano music. But I'm not necessarily going to be writing for the piano, idiomatically for the piano. There's a chance it will be playable by a pianist. I don't know yet, but I'm not going into this with the intention of making a piano piece for a pianist to perform. I am simply using it to put musical lines and textures together to build a story, and to get the musical idea out. And it will probably just be what it is, and that will just be the result. Is it will have a piano sound, but it won't necessarily be pianistic, and that will be the music. So that's kind of an abstract thing that's not done. I don't really see people doing that, which is another reason why I like doing it. But so if I had the intention of orchestrating it, then I would do that, and I would probably alter some things to make it playable for whatever group of instruments I'm orchestrating it for, or I might make it more pianistic, and I can still accomplish the musical idea by changing things, changing some notes around to make it playable. But that's not my concern, so I just want to make that clear in case that's confusing. Like, what are you doing here? sounds like piano, but it's not. What are you doing? Like, you know, I'm a pianist and I'll, that's not playable. Like, don't get mad at me because that's not the purpose. Um, yeah, so the musical idea is everything. That's everything to me. And okay, and so when will I know that it's finished, right? So I will know that it's finished when I have accomplished the musical idea um, in the most minimal sense, you know, and then I can consider it finished. And then, if I want, I can go back and kind of perfect things, uh, and move things around and try to make it even better. So there are various degrees to that of that I'll do depending on how the piece turns out. So sometimes I do a lot of that. Sometimes I don't do a lot of that, and I just let it be. Um, and I don't hold anything too sacred. I care a lot, but I also, nothing is too serious or too sacred or too, serious. I'm having fun, and yeah, so that's the idea. I'm probably rambling and rambling and rambling. I know. Um, okay, so I think maybe that finally covers most things. Um, yeah, okay. So yeah, there'll be plenty more time to talk about all kinds of stuff. So, all right. So, getting into actually composing music, where do we start, right? So, there is not necessarily any right or any rule to this. Start where you want to start. Um, I am, you know, I'm very, so there's going to be preliminary material that's going to happen before I actually start making sounds, before I start putting my hands on the keyboard or, coming up with musical material itself, right? And this is what really, really helps me and what just makes me excited about making music. So, excuse me, one second. All right. Of course, I have like the loudest chair ever. Awesome. Uh, but okay, so if I'm gonna write a piece and I'm going to have the confidence that I can finish it without getting bored or just getting completely lost, I like to have a reason to compose a piece. So I have a very romantic approach to the compositional process. And when I say romantic, I mean as in, kind of the approach that people established in the Romantic period, uh, you know, late Beethoven and Chopin and people like that, um, in that they used a lot of extra musical material to inform the musical material. And extra musical just means basically that it's things outside of the music itself that influence the music itself. And so they would use poetry, they would use novels, um, philosophy of life, different philosophies and stuff, artwork. So all of these things, like external ideas that influence the form and the shape of, and the material of the music, and it kind of, you know, it allowed them to explore another subject, another person's work, the contents of their mind. Uh, Maybe allowed them to explore their inner world more, and then music is the vessel to kind of explore those things and to find a way to shape the music and to approach the music. Because, like, if anything, if you can just start making music, like in any way, like there's just too many, you have to kind of like narrow in on what you're doing and have a focus, you know, for each piece. Uh, that's what's going to help you get to the end, is knowing what it's a kind of what you're looking for. And so this is honestly what I love about music. Like if I just sit down with a melodic idea, just random, you know, texture or harmony or a shape or a color or anything that I just have pop into my head, you know, those are constantly coming through and going and just, you know, constantly moving through my mind. And if I just take one of those and I start making a melody and I just start to want to develop it and take it somewhere, I have a hard time with that. Uh, for some reason, like that's just not how I compose. When it's just simply purely just the sounds, and I'm trying to take it somewhere, that can be fun, but I often get bored, and there's like that sort of dopamine fix that you want along the way throughout the process to the end just doesn't happen for me. It feels too random. It feels like there's just way too many options to choose from for every next, you know, section or part of the piece. And so I personally like to explore an idea or something I'm like kind of struggling with, or you know, an observation of my own inner workings. Like pick a thing and try to explore it, and maybe even come out on the other side after I've finished the piece having solved a problem for myself. That's just how I am. And I love just books. I love nonfiction, so I read a lot, and I like a lot of, you know, I like people's ideas. I just like ideas, and I like observations of human nature and things that just feel kind of rich and have some depth to them and are just not so surface level. And I like relating it back to myself. Um, and so I will often read from just, you know, read a book, you know, something philosophical or something. And if something stands out, I will use maybe a sentence as the structure of the piece. I might break down, you know, literally the visual form of a sentence and the weight of each word and kind of uh, the emotional content of each word. You know, something that has something rich to it, and then that will like inform the actual form of the piece and the where things are going to land roughly, and kind of the emotional color and shape of it. And So yeah, I'll often do that. Literally use language, like written language, and it will usually be somebody else's if I'm doing that. Like it might be an idea I'm exploring within myself that I'm personally interested in, uh, or observing in my world, social world, kind of a thing. But I'll usually, if I do use that, like using a sentence or something, it will usually be something that someone else wrote, because that feels more permanent to me, and I can't alter it, and you know, I want it to be fixed. So I'll use somebody else's thing that I can't alter, so that I can focus more on the music and not worry about like, oh, should I change the word here, or whatever. Anyway, but that's not always how I compose. Sometimes it'll just yeah, I guess we can just get into something. So um, I have a little bit of a preconceived thing. So this is pretty much all just improvised. As you can probably tell, I'm just rambling and saying lots of things and probably repeating myself. But one little, you know, thing I'll start with something that I think is appropriate for this first video ever, and starting a piece, and just kind of the subject that we're on. The most recent thing I read just a few days ago is this. So it's this essay by Peter Sloterdijk. He's a German composer, or a composer. He's a German philosopher. I have read and am currently reading a couple of his other works that are super dense. It's difficult reading, but his ideas are just really tasty and just interesting, and I like his perspective, even though I don't necessarily just agree with everything he says. I just like it. So anyway, so this is a book. I'll try to show it here. This is Peter Sloterdijk. It's the Aesthetic Imperative, and it's a book of his essays. So it's just a bunch of like shorter essays that he's written. And he's very interested in music and the arts and stuff too. So that I relate with him there, obviously. And so when I read things, I tend to mark up my books a lot. I'm constantly just underlining and dog-earing the pages and just making a mess out of it as I try to just highlight things that I want to easily be able to return to, and that's pretty typical. A lot of people do that. So this piece that he wrote, this kind of exploration, is called La musique retrouvée. I think that's how you say it in French. Probably a really good idea that I start to try to just speak French on this video. Super smart. But anyway, so kind of the subject of this is music, obviously. And he's kind of, he never really comes up with, like, it's not like an answer to anything really, but it's an exploration on an idea. And so it kind of starts out with this question that I guess, I haven't read Dr. Faustus, but I guess Thomas Mann wrote in Dr. Faustus that he basically posed the argument that music is demonic territory. I've actually heard people say similar things, but I don't know what his argument is, and it's not, I'm not here trying to find that out right now, but so he poses that question, like, is it demonic territory? And then it starts exploring, he starts exploring from the perspective of the territory idea. So if music is demonic territory, that is making the statement an assumption that music is a territory. And so that's kind of where he approaches it, like, okay, well, let's find out, like, is it a territory? Like, is it a place that you go or inhabit or something like that? Whether or not that's demonic, I don't know. I maybe didn't understand this entire thing completely, but he kind of leaves it open-ended, and never really like makes a statement as to whether he thinks it is or not. But anyway, so the demonic territory thing is not really actually something I'm too concerned with here. The main body of the work is exploring the music from, like, basically asking the question, like, where does our interest in music come from? And he kind of poses the argument that it starts from the womb. So, like, what better place to start than from the actual womb? Yeah, in general, he's basically saying that, like, la musique retrouvée basically means, like, the music rediscovered or recovered. And so his general argument is that like, your only contact with the outside world when you're in the womb is your ear, or your sense of hearing, which I don't know if you can actually literally hear, or if it's more like vibrations in your skull or something. But it's, you're getting a sensation of the vibrations from the outside world, outside of the womb. And that's, I don't know, that's really interesting to me, because that starts conjuring up all these ideas in my head, like, oh, well, geez, what why am I the way that I am? Why do I like the music that I like? And, you know, where does that come from? And how did the womb potentially affect that? So let's see, I'll just kind of read some things that I underlined that I thought were interesting, and we'll see just if something is conjured from that, right? So I'm just looking for some rich source material to work with and to start shaping a musical idea, so that I can have an idea of where to even start, right? Like, where do I start writing a piece? Why am I even starting to write this piece? Well, I'm going to, find that form in some way, through exploring an extra musical idea. So anyway, maybe we'll see if something stands out here. I'm already having thoughts like that. My mind is already just going. So let's see. I underlined this. Let us briefly look at which kind of demonic possession is involved when we enter the territory of music, assuming that this is about a territory that can be entered like a ground or a terrain. So, let's see. We must seek the answer in the acoustic anthropology that has acquainted us with a large number of inspiring new findings on human hearing in recent decades. He says new findings, but I don't know. This was written in I actually don't know exactly when this was written, but this book of essays came out in 2014, so this was probably written at least before that. So there might be newer findings in this regard. But so yeah, anyway, they have taught us that among members of Homo sapiens, like other mammals or creatures that bear live offspring, and even among many birds, hearing is an ability that is acquired very early, actually in prenatal space. The ear is indisputably the leading organ of human contact with the world. And this is already the case at a point in the organism's development when the individual as such is not yet there. To the extent that the adverb there indicates the possibility that a person is at a sufficient distance from things to be able to point to an object or circumstance. So like you have this sort of contact with the outside world through hearing, but you're not really there, and you're not really like conscious yet, as far as I know. I'm pretty sure. Let's see. Even in adults, hearing is not so much an effect the subject experiences in relation to a source of sound, but occurs rather as immersion of the sensitive organ and its owner in an acoustic field. Okay. Even in adults, hearing is not so much an effect the subject experiences in relation to a source of sound. So I think basically he's saying like, okay, this applies even more strongly to the hearing of the unborn child. Okay. So let's see, what else? Individual. So first, the sounds of the mother's heart that set the existential beat like a constant repetitive rhythm. Okay, I'll back up here to the beginning of this passage here. So the primal hearer's way of being, the primal hearer, so the fetus, is defined from the very beginning by its embedding in an internal sonorous continuum dominated by two emanations from the maternal surroundings. So it's just like surrounded by this sonorous continuum of just these, like, what I'm imagining is just vibrations and impulses and stuff like that. So first, the sounds of the mother's heart that set the existential beat like a constant repetitive rhythm. So we're hearing the heartbeat, kind of feeling that. And second, her voice producing free prose that impregnates the fetal ear with a melodic dialect. So we're hearing the mother's heartbeat. That's like a consistent thing. And then we're also hearing, at another frequency, her voice just in a free pose, a free form. So just free rhythm, spoken rhythm, but that has a level of organization to it. It's not just completely random. She's probably repeating certain phrases, and there's a cadence to her speech. See, I'm like thinking of all this stuff. You have this consistent rhythmic thing going on with the heartbeat. You have the style of prose that the mother uses in her speech. These are like musical things. Let's see. We generally experience the world as a place completely removed from music. It is the noises of our surroundings that dominate in this world. And above all, the inescapable chatter of our fellow human beings, which the media amplify to the maximum nowadays, and then the daily noise profile with the acoustic signatures of our households, our workplaces, and our traffic systems. As a result, the human ear is a slavish, servile, and secretarial organ because, to begin with, it can only bow to the authority of the first available sounds around it. Music, by contrast. Okay, so like we are kind of slaves to just a sound environment, kind of like we are when we're in the womb, right? So we can't control that we are hearing the heartbeat and the mother's voice and these external sounds coming through the womb, through the mother's belly. We can't control that. That's part of our world. We're kind of a slave to that. And so then that's the baseline. So then what is music, right? Music, by contrast, has the intrinsic effect of carrying us away. It invites us to start over again with a different kind of response, and this implies, however obliquely, the return to the realm of the heartbeat and the archaic soprano. So it's like we are conditioned. Interesting. Okay. So we're in a much simpler world of sounds when we're in the womb. And so, it's like we're trying to, when we listen to music, we have this desire for music because it takes us back to that comforting place of being in the womb. We hear this like rhythm of the heartbeat, and we hear the archaic soprano, which is our mother's voice, which is, not literally soprano, which is way up here, right? Height, that's like the soprano, but in relation to, in the context, it's probably a higher pitch than the heartbeat, our mother's voice is. That's just interesting. I'm not going to read this whole book. I'm conjuring up an idea, and I'm getting some imagery in my head I can really go deep into, I think, which is going to be fun. The prose of ordinary existence is based on the fact that from birth onwards, human children make a trivial but incredible discovery. The world is a still, hollow place in which the heartbeat and the primal soprano are catastrophically silenced. Damn. So that's intense, and I kind of like it like that. There's a lot of material there. Existence in the lighted world is connected to a forcible loss we can never really fathom. For humans, from the first moment on, being in the world involves the unreasonable demand that we do without the sonic continuity of that initial intimacy. Damn, this is good. And this is like so serious, but you can tell when I'm in music making mode, nothing is actually like serious. It will deal with a lot of dark subjects and a lot of like serious, heavy things, but it's never like to me it's funny, and it's an interesting just observation of things. It's just I enjoy just the observation of nature and humanity. It's funny, you know. It's kind of comical, even though it's tragic. And there's a lot of material to work with when making music, when you are focusing on these things. Let's see here. Sonic continuity. So from this time on, silence transmits the alarm signal of being. Silence transmits the alarm signal of being. God. I feel like he's such a poet. Like, from this time on, the silence transmits the alarm signal of being. So you like, you see a lot of people who are, and we all experience this at some point probably. Some people are more comfortable than others with just silence and being alone, because then the existential thoughts come in. It's like then just being and existing becomes more potent, and that's like scary. It's something you want to like cover up and hurry and put on some music, or a video or something that feels, maybe it's, you're looking for that comfort and safety of the womb that you like subconsciously are kind of remembering or something. I don't know. I'm not saying that I fully subscribe to this, but it's interesting, and we'll just kind of assume that it's true for now, just to be in the world of it. So only the mother's voice, which can be heard from outside, builds a precarious bridge between then and now. Okay, so you're in this womb situation. You have the comfort of the vibrations that you are familiar with from everyday life, your mother's everyday life, and then you're ripped from that womb, and there's this like bright light and silence and probably loud high pitches, and like I can just imagine like it's all muffled inside, and then you come out and it's like super bright light coming in, and this like separation from that comfort, that warm, that warm sack. Anyway, so then only the mother's voice, which can be heard from outside, builds a precarious bridge between then and now. So then you have the comfort of your mother's voice, right? So you're in constant contact and around your mother when you're first born, and as you kind of grow up through the first initial years, and you're hearing her voice constantly. So it's like that's that tie, that's that bridge back to that comfortable place that you started. It's the closest thing, and your mother's voice has a different pitch and tone on the outside, whereas it was probably muffled inside, but it's familiar. You're connected to her, right? So, yeah, that's just an interesting thing. So you have this tie still, but it's not as fully encompassed as it was, but it's there. And then over time, I'm imagining this kind of like, as you grow up, you start going to school, you start being sent to whatever daycare, you start separating from your mom a little bit more over, more and more. And then you become even more separated from that comfort. And so then you have to find something else that resembles that, right? And so that's just kind of what I'm imagining right now. And then to this is an interesting subject, but I want to kind of now explore like where this fits in my world, like maybe observe myself through this lens. But just a little further here. So let's see. Music exists because human beings are creatures that insist on wanting to have the best once again. All music, including elementary or primitive music, begins wholly under the auspices of rediscovery and repetition obsession. The specific allure of musical art, right up to its supreme structures, including its moments of evidentness, of being carried along, and of joyful astonishment, is linked to retrieving a sonorous presence we believe to be forgotten. So it's basically saying like we make music and we want to be in music, listening to it or whatever, because because we want the best yet again, which is just to be in that womb, just to be back there, back home. Um, that's funny, but it feels, you know, like there's probably something to this. Uh, let's see. Music is most like itself. When music is most like itself, it speaks to us as musique retrouvée. When music is most like itself, it speaks to us as musique retrouvée, which is as this rediscovered thing, this rediscovered music. When it is most like itself. So it's like music can be in any form, but when it is doing its job the best, it puts us in this mental space, maybe even physically, but in this space where we feel warm and cozy, or just taken away, carried away. Yeah, yeah. So that's the difference between music, which is, a form of organized sound for a purpose, versus just all of the extraneous sounds that we hear on a day-to-day basis in our world. So, okay. So it's a good place to start, okay? So the womb, and where does music even come from? Why do we make music? I think this is a good idea. Okay. I actually think, okay. So this gives me a lot of material. I can just stop reading from this now. My mind is like going crazy, so now I need to like try to organize this. Put this down over here. Okay. So I'm imagining, so I'm thinking of this form. It feels, pretty. Let me get some water real quick. I should probably get better at like muting my mic when I'm making all these bodily functions, chair creaks and stuff. Anyway, so okay, so I have this general idea. I'm seeing a general shape, a general, in the hierarchy of music. I'm seeing this general like sort of progression that is this, comfort from in the womb. You're being kind of, ripped out. And it's shocking, it's dissonant, it's tragic as you're born. Like it's this like you come out of the womb, you're slapped by the doctor, you're crying. It's bright lights, noises, just intense, incredibly intense, and just insane. Just terror is happening. You have no idea what's going on. You're not even really conscious. You're just experiencing all these, you know, all these sensations, sensory overload kind of a thing. And then you're in your mother's arms, and you're back to this sense of rest, but still not totally comfortable. But she's talking to you and soothing you with her voice, and it's the closest thing. And then, it's like, okay, so then you grow up, kind of your first exposure to music, like intentionally, probably. I mean, you're probably hearing some of your parents' music and stuff a little bit, but they're probably putting you in front of a cartoon or some children music, something they feel is appropriate for a baby, soothing to a baby or whatever. And so you're listening to this like very simplistic, you know what? I'm going to start drawing this. So another thing I haven't really talked about yet is that while I did mention that I'm very, visual when it comes to music, it really helps me, just get a form down and something to kind of aim towards without being too strict. So when I start thinking about a formal idea and textural ideas and stuff, I will just start drawing sort of an abstract form. And so, yeah, I actually have this pad ready. There we go. And actually, I'll just make this bigger. Yeah, I'll just get rid of myself here because you don't want to look at my dumb face. Make this bigger. Yeah. Cool. So I'll usually just kind of draw a rough timeline, like just a line. So it'll go like this. Oh wait, I need to grab a pen. This kind of thing. And I'll roughly divide it just to get a quick visual of where I am. So yeah, I'll just make a rough thing like this. It'll be super rough, okay? And then I'll just kind of start drawing. And this is, probably not how everyone wants to. A lot of people don't operate this because this is pretty abstract, but this is just how I work, and it works really well for me. So I'm thinking of this general. Okay, so we'll start here. So we're like in the womb. We're in the womb. This is just so funny and weird. So I'm thinking like when we're in the womb, what is actually happening in there, and maybe what did I experience in there, knowing what my parents were like. So it's probably going to be, it's all going to be like low and muffled. You're not really hearing actual high frequencies because you're in this bubble. You're in this like sack of liquid, right? So it's going to be like really low and muffled and a limited harmonic range. And so, I'll start here. This is kind of like below, this is kind of like, say, the middle line of just the sort of, I don't know, just the range of sound here. So if that line is the middle, then kind of down here. So I'm thinking of, you have kind of, this is just what's coming to mind, little things like this, and kind of like these round, there's not really any like sharp noises. There's things, it's kind of just, there's like round noises. There's little booms and beats and maybe like longer things, just things like this, right? I know it's super abstract, but this is kind of the idea. So it's like you're hearing, pulses and vague sounds from outside. You're hearing your mother's voice, which has more of a consistence, it has its own cadence. Maybe that's these little bubbles here. And then, I don't know, you can go outside of the lines a little bit. That's fine. Maybe a heartbeat, I don't really like consistent beat, so I probably won't do a literal heartbeat when I'm thinking of, kind of what's the sound of this going to be like. That's a little too on the nose for me, but I'll, probably explain more of that later. So now we have a place to start. It's probably going to be in the lower range of the keyboard, I guess, when I go start trying to make things up. And yeah, so that's where it will start. And then we probably have this, we're kind of like, what's the next? Well, let's explore this just a little bit here, because I'm thinking of like, what was my experience? My dad my dad has always been like just super into music, and his thing is rock and roll and heavy metal. And so, he's been that way forever. He still is. And it's funny, like it's funny. I'm starting to think of this stuff and it just makes so much sense. So I'm just kind of thinking like, okay, well, I know I'm all over the place here and this is kind of annoying, but I'll show you my whole kind of idea. So it's basically this like it, it's this sort of large crescendo type of thing, this buildup of activity from kind of low to high or simple and low to more full. And so the general shape is, I'm kind of thinking of, this kind of thing, just like it's gonna go like this in a few different forms, probably maybe in volume and in texture. Um, and so I've already got this image in my mind where I'm like, okay, so we're starting with this music and just vibrations and things, these consistent, like this sort of beat of the heartbeat, the the soprano. So we have this kind of two-part thing going on, right? Those are the two consistent things. The consistency of your mother talking and then her heartbeat, and then we have all these extraneous kind of vibrations at different intensities at all different times coming from the outside. um, and I'm thinking of, okay, well, how does this affect as me, someone who is, excuse me, interested in composing? How has this affected me, and like, why do I like the music that I like right now? Like, why do I like to compose this sort of atonally rhythmic, like, seemingly complex stuff that's kind of noisy and things like this? Like, why am I interested in this kind of thing? And honestly, the more that I think about this, the more it kind of makes sense. Because I'm just imagining, like, my dad had these big speakers, and he would constantly be playing loud music, just loud rock and roll, heavy metal, sonically rich and noisy music in general. Um, and I'm just kind of imagining, like, obviously my mom would hang out with him a lot, and she was, she's not super into that stuff, but she, wanted probably to be in his world, and she did like a lot of it, also. And so, like, she's probably in close proximity to that, whether in the room listening to music with him, or kind of just in the house nearby, and while he's, cranking it. And I'm just imagining this, like, these speakers just beaming this like sonic assault at my mom's belly as I'm in there, just, normalizing this. And so, yeah, like, it, it kind of, I probably started with a very complex and noisy and lots of variety of vibrations happening, fairly consistency throughout the 9 months that I was in there. And so it kind of makes sense that that would be what I would seek out as something comforting. um yeah, interesting. That's actually really interesting, and it kind of makes a lot of sense, assuming this is all kind of true and you're really actually influenced by what was happening in the womb sonically. Like, it kind of makes sense. This is crazy. So see, I'm already like getting enlightened, or at least exploring something within myself. Like, why am I like this? Well, okay, maybe this is kind of why I'm like this. um, so, okay, so we start in the womb. Maybe we are, like, I'm imagining, we're being ripped from the womb, and it's just super intense and chaotic. So I'm just, you know, we'll do this yellow, because yellow is kind of like intense and sort of like a car horn, like noisy, and maybe it's just, you know, I don't know, just chaotic, intense, like high contrast to what happened before, but it's really quick, and you start kind of normalizing to it, um, gradually. And so, you kind of get, I don't know, you get the comfort of your mom holding you, and but you're not really hearing her heartbeat much anymore. um, you know, this kind of thing. Um, and then, you start getting exposed to what maybe your mom or your parents decide is appropriate, which is probably children's music, right? So the closest thing to that, maybe heartbeat and the simplicity of being in a womb, uh, ends up being fulfilled to some extent with children's music. So that comes from, cartoons and children's shows that you might watch, and maybe even from your toys that make musical sounds and stuff. It's very simple, right? And so I'm thinking of like this, then I don't know, just abstractly, like I'm thinking of these simple, clean kind of, you know, um, just like happy little things that, these little circles kind of relate back to you, what's familiar. And I don't know, just something like this, just like clean, a little bit more organized, but, melodic and pretty simple, and generally in a higher range too. Like you're not hearing the low grumbles and low sounds of your mother's heart beating, or being inside the womb and stuff. So it's a little higher in range. And then you start like, okay, I can kind of just make a dividing line here, and you kind of like start gradually moving further away from that, and you start finding your own interests. You start kind of hearing your parents' music in the car or whatever, or in the house, and you start taking on your own interests, which is probably some other kind of form of popular music, and things that are, not too crazy, but like something that's feels familiar depending on your influence. For me, it's like I was obviously into rock and roll very early on, from since I can remember, but that's natural because my dad was just already into it, so that was just in my world. So, but I liked simpler, catchier things. I didn't like arrhythmic, like chaotic, noisy things necessarily. I liked more kind of the poppier side of that stuff. And so, but it becomes more complex. So maybe, let's see, we'll grab, this is kind of an evolution. So, okay, so you get the simple beats of your childish music, which arguably, a lot of music is still the same today in a way. It's like a lullaby, just in an adult uniform or something. So you kind of have this thing, you get, more noises, a little bit more complexity, and a little less consistent. It just gets a little bit more, yeah, and maybe you have some lower, tones that, kind of now represent the heartbeat again, some bass and stuff like that you didn't get in your childhood music, your children's music. And then, and then, in my case, like if I'm making this kind of about me, I became a musician really early on, and started out with the simpler stuff, and then gradually, very quickly started like wanting more and more complex things. I wasn't satisfied with what I was hearing. I didn't want just the simpler stuff. I wanted something more that fulfilled my, whatever, my busy mind, my interest. As I started to understand the simpler stuff, I wanted to go further and find something that was more interesting. And so I just increasingly became more interested in, jazz and classical music, and things that I didn't really grow up with. Like it was all rock and roll. So it's kind of funny. It's like I had to like rebel the opposite way from a lot of other people. A lot of people will grow up with kind of conservative parents that expose their kids to classical music, maybe jazz, and things that feel more refined or whatever, and then they rebel and go, become a punk rocker or a metalhead or something like that. And for me, I rebelled against my metalhead dad and became this classical nerd. It's kind of silly, but I'm already gonna run out of room, so I'll try to make another section here. Well, actually, this might be fine. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this. I'm already it's a very simple form ultimately, overall, like the thing that I drew, kind of crescendo lines that I drew earlier. So then, we get into this more complex world, and I just want it to be more and more complex, and the consistency starts dropping, and the rhythms, and it just is, there's different textures, different colors happening. And I'm just kind of like, there's things that relate back to the early stuff, but, the familiarity, um, but it just is like more, you know, just more complex, a lot more, maybe crazy higher lines, things that are just, yeah, I don't know, stuff like this. So this isn't literal form. I'm not trying to literally render this obviously in music, but this is a general idea, a general kind of guideline to follow, a formal idea, right? And you can see that we get this kind of, this ultimate like crescendo happening like this, right? So this from limited range, limited low range to opening and opening and opening. And maybe some of this, excuse me, we kind of, maybe this is also, I don't know, for some reason, some masochistic reason, we kind of like this, this thing becomes more comfortable, this chaos thing. I don't know, it just feels like that's kind of true in my experience. Kind of this enjoying discomfort and sort of embracing it and observing it. And, when I'm outside of that, discomfort and pain, it's fun to sort of observe it objectively and to formalize it into something musical or something, use it in an artful way, I guess. So it becomes a different form. It becomes a little bit more intellectualized, a little bit more formalized. I don't know. So that's kind of cool. That's, when we make music, we, you can do whatever you want, obviously, but I like it to be coherent. And I want it to have a sense of going somewhere and referring back to itself. Like we want to build a sort of language and build an expectation, and then kind of break that and toy with the expectation maybe. And then we also want kind of recurring ideas to happen, and come back in different forms and things like that. So that's what makes music interesting, is you're building this language, this world, and it refers to itself, and it redefines itself, and that kind of thing. Yeah. So, okay. So the general form is this sort of, escalating towards a climax at the end, right? There are lots of different musical forms, and this is kind of what this one is naturally becoming. This is kind of cool, actually. So I just had this, like, the thought about immersion, going back to this thing. One second, I'm just thinking. So, like, yeah, another way we can relate, we can sort of redefine our experience. So, okay, so it's like the argument is that we are in this womb, and that's the perfect place, right? Like that's the best, that's the ideal place, and we want to find our way back to there in some way. And so, it's like I tend to like music that is sort of that sort of like washes over me a lot of the time. I like a lot of musical information, and I'm kind of thinking of this immersion idea. So, it's like we're immersed here. Geez, if I can use this thing properly. So we're kind of like in the ideal state, immersed, right? And then eventually I reach a point where I'm having a lot of fun with music, and I'm finding the most enjoyment out of music. And it's this idea of kind of like, it's a different form of this immersion. I'm not in a womb. I'm not hearing just these low frequencies. I'm in a different space, but I'm creating, and I'm creating that effect. I'm being washed over by sound, and even in just doing the thing and actively composing, I am outside of myself a little bit. Like I'm not in that I can't remember how he put it, but that like silent, where silence kind of like accentuates your own existence and the sort of scary whatever um, pain of knowing that you're alive, and where you want to distract yourself. So in a way, I'm finding that immersion um, in a new form, right? So that can be, we can somehow relate back to that original, back to the beginning in a new way. And that would help strengthen our musical story and give it some consistency and form. So yeah, so this is, I think this is a pretty good place to start. Um, and then I think it might be, I'm already seeing, just looking at this form with this kind of beginning and end that kind of relate to each other. And then this middle section, this is, it's funny, this is just such a natural thing, but this is very similar. This is kind of outlining the general idea of like a sonata form. So this is like a traditional classical form, and I'll kind of just draw it out just to give an example of the general idea. So there are nuances to this, and there are different approaches to this depending on depending on your approach, I guess. But so there is sonata form, just for those who don't know. It's basically in three parts, very similar to this. So we have, you start with the exposition. Okay, and the exposition is where you introduce themes. So you'll usually introduce opposing themes. So we'll call this, theme A, and then theme B. So this is, and if you're familiar with sonata form, don't crucify me here. Like, I know this is very generic, but it's all we need right now. We're not trying to write a sonata specifically. It's just, this is helpful to know. And then you have kind of the three main kind of sections of it is the exposition. So you're starting out with kind of an argument. You have one kind of musical statement, and then you have another contrasting thing that kind of poses the opposite side of the argument. Usually it's kind of a contrasting statement. And so you establish those two things, and then that's considered some people will say that's the thesis and then the antithesis. So this is just words, and then we have the development section. And the development section is this, it's kind of like anything goes. And it's funny, you hear like, if you hear other people like talk about this, they're like, you can do literally anything, just go insane. Oh, you can't even see this on your screen, sorry. I'll try to be more conscious of that. There we go. Okay, so then this, like, basically anything can happen, but generally what does happen is it takes motives and just material, like chunks of material from the exposition material, and it kind of starts playing with it and developing new phrases and trying to tell a story with it, trying to create something kind of unstable and something that kind of develops, like something that moves from one place to another. So you can do that however you want. Like, you're free to tell a story and to have consistency of material and consistency of sound throughout this piece, so that you don't completely lose the plot. You will often use rhythmic and small motivic pieces of the themes from the exposition, and they can be transposed to different keys. They can be they can be chopped up and combined. Excuse me. And geez, that's so impolite, but sorry. Anyway, so there's the development, you take A and B on a journey and you tell a story. And then you come back and you have the recapitulation. Okay, recapitulation. And this is where you kind of return to the themes, but usually they will have evolved. They have gone through some stuff, right? So they've gone through a journey, and now they're kind of back in a new form. And it doesn't really, depending on how true you're trying to stick with this form or the style of music you're writing, you can do whatever you want. They could be pretty vague, or they could return in the exact form they started in. But they went through something. They're probably gonna be a little bit changed, a little bit evolved. And so yeah, I guess I'm inclined to explain more about how this works, but this is just the general idea. So you come back with the themes, okay? So then this is considered the synthesis. Okay, so the synthesis of the thesis and the antithesis. And they come back home in a new form. That's basically it. So that's the gist of sonata form. So that that could help us, just being conscious of that. Like, we're not trying to write the sonata, but like that's a well-proven form, and our form just kind of looks like that. So that could be a thing. Yeah. Okay, cool. So we will move this. Come back into view here. Oh wait, wrong one. All right. Okay, so I unfortunately took way longer than I expected. I'll try to get better at managing my time doing this. That's going to be a difficult one. I might have to set an alarm. But I don't really have time to start making music right now. I actually have to go. Which that might happen. I might just have to abruptly stop during these. But the idea for this is that this is going to be a series. I don't know exactly how long. It won't be super long. It'll probably just be a few sessions, because I'm not trying to write some big complex thing. I'm trying to show how I get through a piece. And yeah, we'll just start writing music next time. I was really hoping to get to it today and just start, since I have all of this fresh in my head, but we can just revisit it again when we come back. And yeah, so I appreciate you if you are watching this and you've made it to the end. Thank you for your patience. This was pretty scary for me, and I know it was super rough and probably frustrating. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. Maybe it wasn't, but maybe it was. I'm just critical on myself. But yeah, next time we'll dive into it. We'll revisit these ideas, and we'll dive into just starting to make some sound and starting to just get into the messy process of composing, now that we have kind of a little bit of a guideline to work with. It might totally change as the music informs, as the music starts telling us where it might want to go. So it'll be a process of discovery. And yeah, I'm excited to start. I really wish I could just do it right now. But I must go. So thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time. I think I'm actually going to do this tomorrow. I don't know at exactly which time. I might try to start at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. So that's 9 Pacific, I think. Anyway, you'll figure it out. And yeah, thanks. All right. See ya.